Like the pine trees lining the winding road. I've got a name. I've got a name.
Hi, this is Ben Hart. I'd like to talk to you today about how to get straight A's in college. And it's really not as hard as you might think. Now, I was not exactly a straight A college student. I graduated from Dartmouth. My final GPA was 3.56, so I aced a bit more than half my courses. Not bad. But I also spent a lot of time doing other things besides classwork. I was a member of a fraternity. I started a school newspaper. I wrote a book during my senior year, which became a national bestseller. I had a girlfriend and an active social life. I thought I did a pretty good job at playing this game called college. I was a good college strategist. I wanted good grades, but I also wanted to get the full college experience, including the social life. During the graduation ceremony, I was interested to see who made Phi Beta Kappa honors. Phi Beta Kappa, of course, is the most prestigious college honors society. You had to be in the top 10% of your class to get into Phi Beta Kappa. I thought these Phi Beta Kappa honor inductees would all most likely be nerds who I never saw on campus, because they most likely had been cloistered away in solitary confinement for 4 years doing nothing but studying. That's what I thought. To my shock, many, if not most, of the Phi Beta Kappa students were not nerds at all. Many were friends of mine who were also at all the frat parties, played varsity sports, and seemed to have plenty of time for fun. A number of these top students have been lifelong friends of mine, became captains of Fortune 500 companies, or top lawyers earning $1,000 an hour, or world-renowned doctors, famous movie directors, best-selling authors, federal judges, U.S. senators, Pulitzer Prize winners, masters of technology, amazing inventors, and multi-billionaires. I asked several of them what was their secret to getting straight A's in college with such apparent ease. And they all told me the same thing. And it's pretty much what I suspected because I pretty much followed their rules myself. They just followed them better. There are really 5 rules that you have to follow to get straight A's. All 5 rules fit together. They are, number 1, knowing how to manage your time, which really is how to prioritize your assignments and tasks each week and each day. Number 2, knowing exactly what to study, which is crucial to your time management. Number 3, knowing how to study so that you actually remember what you study. Number 4, winning the war against procrastination. And number 5, choosing the right classes. And let's start with time management. Managing your time is actually about managing yourself. You only have 24 hours in a day. 8 hours needs to be reserved for sleep, 2 hours for meals, 3 to 4 hours each day for extracurricular activities you want to do, which might include a varsity sport, fitness, hanging with friends, parties, or whatever. And let's say 2.5 hours per day for classes on average during the week. Then add in an hour or so for buffer time, another hour for chores, laundry, showering, brushing teeth, making your bed, cleaning up your room, going to the store for supplies, those kinds of things. You also have to allow time for walking to classes, walking to meals, etc. So that leaves about 6 hours a day, at most, for focused study, the real work that you have to do. But that 6 hours a day is really unrealistic. Things will come up that you'll want to do. Your friends are going to want you to go with them on a Dunkin' Donuts run, or hang out at the local tavern. What this means is that realistically, you only have about 5 hours per day for focused study. What this also means is that you won't be able to do all the work and readings that your professors assign. No one can. There are just not enough hours in the day. So you're going to have to pick and choose what to study and study that hard, and you're also going to have to decide what you can frankly skip. Not because it's not worth learning, but you're just not going to have enough time in the day to learn all of it. So how do you choose what to study and what to skip? Isn't that a bit of a gamble? What if what I decide to skip is on the test? Well, I'm not going to promise you that won't happen, because it will. But we're talking here about how to use the limited time that you have in the day to maximum impact, to tip the odds of success dramatically in your favor. Because remember, in many, if not most classes, especially in math, science, and the technical subjects, grading is on a curve, meaning that you're graded in relation to how everyone else in the class did. So if you're in the top 20% of test takers, you'll get an A. The next 20% down, get a B. The next 20% down, get a C. And so on. Some scale like that. I've been in classes where getting 60% on a test earned me an A because the test was so difficult, and the rest of the class did even worse on the test than I did. But how do you know what you should study and what you should skip? And that's really the big question, isn't it? If we knew exactly what to study, school would be a whole lot easier. We could just study that and skip everything else, and we'd get all A's, plus have plenty of time for fun. So how can we know what to study and what we can skip? Well, my number one rule for figuring that out was never to skip class, and to always sit in the front row. Not because I wanted to win brownie points with the professor, though that is a benefit too, because in many classes, part of your grade is determined by class participation. Plus, if the professor likes you, you're much more likely to get the benefit of the doubt if there's a subjective aspect to the grading. Plus, the lectures are where you will learn what the professor thinks is important for you to know. The lectures provide you your roadmap for you to get your A. The lectures are your shortcut to academic success. By always sitting in the front row, you will also make sure that you are paying attention. You won't be checking your phone for Facebook notifications because that would be rude to the professor. In fact, you should have all your notifications and phone sounds turned off. You should be using your phone to record the lecture. Also, if you're sitting in the front row, you won't be distracted by the pretty girl sitting in the middle of the class. Have a rule never to check your phone during the lecture. Your phone should be used for one and only one thing, and that's to record the lecture while you also take notes. The goal with your note-taking is not to transcribe every word of the lecture. The goal of your note-taking is to capture the main points, concepts, and key pieces of information. After the lecture is over, you should listen to the recording you made of the lecture, so that you can fill in the blanks in your notes that you might have missed during the live lecture. You probably won't need to listen to every word of the recording, certainly not in real-time speed. You can speed through the recording, listen to it at double speed, and then slow it down and pause it where you need to, so you can fill in the missing gaps and missing pieces of information in your notes. There are also a number of good apps that can turn your audio recording of the lecture into text. Your next task is to create a set of flashcards based on your notes. Come up with questions that you think might be on a test on this lecture. Put the answers on the back of the flashcards so that if there were to be a test just on the content of this lecture, you could easily ace it. Now here's something else you have to do. When you encounter a topic or a concept or a term that you don't understand, head on over to Wikipedia and get the quick definition, description, summary, or overview of that topic, concept, or term, and create a set of flashcards based on that Wikipedia article. If you run into terms and concepts in that Wikipedia article that you don't fully understand, look up those terms and concepts too in Wikipedia. Whenever tackling a difficult subject or a dense work of literature or philosophy, Wikipedia is enormously helpful for getting a summary or overview of the topic. Follow this program for every lecture. Now you might be thinking this will take a lot of time. Well, yes, it does take a lot of time, in a way. But doing this actually saves you an enormous amount of time in the long run because now you know what the professor thinks is important for you to know, and you have created your flashcards on the first lecture. And the lecture is where you learn exactly what you need to study. Now, the beauty of this process is it also forces you to learn the material through repetition. Repetition is the mother of all learning. Now let's look at the best way to tackle a textbook. Very often the lectures track with the main textbook of the course, especially in any kind of technical subject like math, science, economics, or software coding, or history too, where you will be expected to understand and be able to comment on the key events. If the lectures track with the textbook, it's a very good idea to tackle the chapter on which the lecture is about before the lecture. This will make the lecture so much easier to follow and understand. So how do you tackle a chapter in a textbook? Well, what most students do is start on page 1. They start reading and highlighting whatever they think is important. What usually happens is too much gets highlighted, sometimes entire pages of text, and the student absorbs almost none of the actual material. They just read and highlight, read and highlight. That's not how to tackle a textbook. The way you study a textbook is first to read all the questions at the end of the chapter. Almost all textbooks include questions at the end of the chapter that tell you what the author thinks are important concepts for you to know. Almost certainly the test that you take will include these kinds of questions. Create flashcards with these questions. Very often textbooks also include summaries and lists of the key points. Once you've gone through all this, go through the chapter and read all the bold print. The headlines, the subheads, anything that seems to jump off the page. All this bold print also tells you what the author and your professor want you to know. Then go through the chapter again and examine all the photos, charts, graphs, read all the captions and the accompanying text. These charts, graphs, photos, and captions are put there by the author to make sure that you understand the most important concepts and information. Then go back through the chapter again and read just the first and last sentence of each paragraph. A paragraph is supposed to be a self-contained idea or concept. It's like a mini essay. The first sentence introduces the idea. The last sentence gives you the bottom line point. Then, after you've done that, read the entire chapter. So this process exposes you to the material 5 times. You've read the questions at the end, you've read the bold print, you've studied all the charts and pictures and graphs, and you've read the first and last sentence of each paragraph, and now you've read the entire chapter. And instead of highlighting text, take notes on index cards of the key info and concepts in the chapter. Notes should be in the form of short keywords or summaries, perhaps pictures that you might draw. Your own words and representations of the key concepts and information. These notes and drawings that you make on index cards of the key concepts and info then become your flashcards. Create questions on the reverse side of each flashcard that go with the information. If you do a good job at this, you won't have to read the chapter again. You'll have a summary of the key points and information on your index cards, which you've turned into flashcards. Also, when you encounter terms and concepts in the textbook that you don't understand, look them up in Wikipedia. Then create flashcards on these terms and concepts, just like you did with the lecture. Same process. And I do believe that creating good old-fashioned flashcards is the best system for learning and remembering a lot of material. And create flashcards yourself. Don't buy them off the internet and print them. The act of you creating index cards, which you then turn into flashcards, gets your body physically into the act of learning and forces you to slow down and really internalize the material. If you're just reading and highlighting text, you're going through the material much too quickly, really skimming through it. You can't learn that way. You learn through repetition and by slowing down. Also, when possible with your note-taking and when creating your flashcards, draw pictures instead of writing words. We remember images much better than we remember text because text is abstract. The phrase, "a picture is worth 1,000 words," really is true. A picture has much more impact on the brain than abstract text. From my notes, I also like to create what I call mind maps. A mind map is a chart where you put the key idea in the center of the page, often in the form of a picture that you draw, in a box. You can then label this picture that you draw with the keyword or phrase that briefly describes the concept. Then you connect the sub-concepts, ideas, and related information to the central concept in the center of the page with lines. You also want to group related sub-concepts together, perhaps in a box. This is a powerful way to learn because the way the mind learns a new concept is to try to link it to concepts that you already know. So for example, we learn to run after we can walk. Running is kind of like walking, but it's different. If you've learned Spanish, it's not such a big jump to learn French. It's a much bigger jump to learn Chinese. It's an even bigger jump to learn calculus. Okay, so now you've had 10 exposures to the material, if you tackle textbooks and lectures the way I've outlined here. Plus, you now have a full set of flashcards and a mind map on the first chapter of the textbook and the lecture for review later as the exam date gets closer. Again, I'm sure this sounds like it takes a lot of time, and it does, but it actually saves you a lot of time in the long run. Much better than just reading and highlighting, which actually is just time wasted. Now, in most courses, the professor will give you a syllabus that lists all the books for the course. There will be a main textbook, or a list of primary books, and a list of supplemental books and readings. My advice is to skip the supplemental readings. Not that these won't be worthwhile and interesting, but your professor has labeled them supplemental for a reason. Unless he specifically mentions one of these supplemental readings in his lecture, you can pretty safely skip all supplemental readings. Make sure that you know the lecture and the main textbook. Focus on those. or the primary works if you are taking a literature course. For any technical course, such as math, science, or computer coding, make sure that you do all the problem sets and practice work that the professor assigns. Plus do extra problem sets and practice work. Math, science, and computer coding are very much like a foreign language. You learn by memorizing and practicing. You learn by doing. You don't learn piano just by showing up at the piano lesson once a week and maybe practicing the song once between lessons. You learn the piano by practicing every day. Doing the problem sets and practice in technical subjects like math, science, and software coding is how you learn these skills and subjects. It's the only way to learn them. Again, repetition is the mother of all learning. Now, I was an English literature major at Dartmouth. I also took a lot of history and philosophy classes. In all these courses, there was an enormous amount of reading. In fact, you could not get through all the reading assignments even if you were to read for 24 hours a day. And a lot of it was very dense reading, especially in philosophy. But I managed to ace almost all of my literature, history, and philosophy courses without doing all the reading. In fact, I might have only done about half the reading that was assigned. But what I did do was I made sure I always sat in the front row of lectures, took good notes, recorded the lectures, listened to the lecture again, added to my notes, and created index cards and mind maps of the key points and concepts that the professor made in the lecture. And number two, I bought the Monarch notes, or Cliff Note summaries of the books, and I would study those. And then I created my index cards summarizing the key points in the Cliff Notes or Monarch Notes summaries. We didn't have Wikipedia or the internet when I was in college, but we had Cliff Notes and Monarch Notes summaries of the great works of literature. For my philosophy classes, I purchased Frederick Copleston's summaries of the major philosophers. Copleston was a Jesuit priest who wrote a history of philosophy, summarizing what every major philosopher had to say. I would read these summaries and create my index cards, flashcards, and mind maps based on these summaries and memorize those. Frankly, this was the only way for me to understand what Hegel was saying. And I'm not sure I ever knew what Hegel was saying, but I knew what Copleston said he was saying, and that was good enough. And it's not that I would never read the primary text. I did, but not all of it. I read some of it. I picked the books the professor emphasized in his lectures, or the parts of the book that the professor focused on. Tolstoy's War and Peace is 1,000 pages. Sorry, I'm not going to read all of it. No time, especially with all the other readings on the list, plus 3 or 4 other courses that I'm taking. I'll read the Cliff Notes summaries of it, memorize the cast of characters, have something to say about each character. I'll understand the overall plot outline, and I'll pay close attention to the lecture. Then I'll read as much of the primary material as I can, at least what the professor is most focused on. And I'll learn enough to be able to answer any likely question on the test, or be able to write something on an essay test that demonstrates an understanding of the material and that tracks with what the professor was saying in his or her lecture, plus add a few of my own insights. Now you might ask, doesn't this defeat the entire purpose of college, which is to learn the material? It almost sounds like cheating. Well, remember what your number one goal is. Goal number one is to do what's needed to get an A, not spend my entire semester reflecting on the nuances of Tolstoy's War and Peace, as worthwhile as that would be if I actually had the time. But I have 3 other courses I'm taking in addition to my Russian literature course. I have to manage my time, which is limited. I only have 1,440 minutes in a day. 480 of those minutes have to be reserved for sleep. So I only have 960 minutes per day to squeeze in all that I have to do. Plus, if I do all the work that's required to get the A, I am learning a lot. Frankly, I know a lot more about Tolstoy's War and Peace by tackling the book this way than if I just started on page 1 and read every word. Plus, I actually did read all of Tolstoy's War and Peace later, after the term was over, during Christmas vacation. And it's a great book. Now let me say another word about note-taking. How to take notes effectively and efficiently. Studies show that people retain more of what's being said if they handwrite notes on paper in a notebook rather than type notes into their laptop computer. The reason is you can type faster than you can write by hand. So when you are typing notes into your computer, you're really more like a transcriber or stenographer, not really thinking about the material. When you take notes by hand with pen and paper, you can't write as fast as you can type. So you have to summarize what's being said with short phrases or even just keywords. This forces you to think, just so you can take effective notes that you will understand later when you're reviewing them. Now this is important. A big part of winning this game called college is also picking the right classes and professors to take. If you are pre-med, you're going to have to take a lot of very tough, difficult, required courses, like organic chemistry. Same if you're a math major, an engineering major, an IT major, or any kind of hard sciences major. What you want to do is avoid taking more than one very difficult class in the same semester, if at all possible. If you're taking organic chemistry, for example, because you're pre-med, try to make your other classes lighter. Try to make your other classes a 20th century American literature course, a philosophy 101 course, perhaps an art history course or creative writing course, because most likely 60% of your time will have to be spent on organic chemistry. Also, if you know that you're going to have to take a really tough course for your pre-med program this coming semester, try to do a lot of work on this class before the semester starts. Get a textbook and do as much of the work as you can before the term starts. Go on YouTube and online to find a course on organic chemistry. Essentially take the entire class once as a dry run before you take the class for credit. Learn the material before the course even starts. If you just start a really tough, demanding course like this cold, with no advanced preparation, the odds of you acing the course are minimal. To get all A's while also experiencing all that college has to offer requires you to be smart about it. Be a tactician. Be a strategist. Treat college like a game that you try to win. Success in life is also a game you should try to win. This game called college is just training for your success later in your career. Many of the same principles of success apply both to winning in college and winning in your career and in life. So, once you've met all the course requirements for med school, engineering school, or whatever graduate school or field that you're entering, make the rest of your course load fun, enjoyable, interesting, and frankly, a bit on the easy side. Go heavy on art history, literature, creative writing, poli-sci, maybe take a couple of film courses. Give yourself the best possible chance to succeed. My dad gave me some great advice on how to succeed in college. My dad was an English literature professor at Dartmouth for 40 years. He was one of the most popular professors at Dartmouth. 1,000 students or more would sign up for his classes. His lectures were riveting, packed with jokes and funny anecdotes that drove home the points that he wanted his students to learn. And what my dad told me was this: don't focus so much on what courses to take. Find out who the best professors are and take those classes. Ask the seniors and juniors who the best professors are. They'll tell you. The same names will keep coming up. When you take a course from a great professor or a great teacher, you tend to learn the material so much better because the lectures are so interesting. The great teachers and professors are masters at taking difficult material and making the concepts understandable for beginners. The net result is, not only will you enjoy the classes, but you'll learn the material. The best professors also tend to be the easiest graders. I believe because they have such a passion for their subject, and they want you to share their passion. The very tough graders in my experience tend to be the worst professors. Their lectures are dull. They often seem to be bitter, angry people. It's almost like they want to take their personal frustrations out on the students, torture the students. Avoid these professors like the plague. Before you sign up for any course, ask as many people as you can about the professor. Ask the seniors and juniors. They'll tell you who the great professors are and who to avoid. Getting all A's or almost all A's in college has very little to do with your intelligence. Figuring out what you need to study and what you can skip is your key to winning the college game. For math and the technical subjects, it's all about doing the problem sets, the homework. Math is about learning the functions, operations, and formulas, the methods. The only way you can do that is with a lot of practice. Repetition is how you learn anything. But it has to be spaced repetition. Cramming for tests the night before never works, any more than you could go out there and perform a piano recital in front of a big audience without lots of daily piano practice over a long period of time. And there are scientific reasons for this.
Like the pine trees lining the winding road, I've got a name, I've got a name.